Alright everyone, let me start today with a story. A story that's over 3,000 years old but somehow more relevant than ever. In Greek mythology, there was a legendary conflict known as the Trojan War. Troy was not just any city, it was a fortress. A powerful, wealthy, heavily defended stronghold that the Greeks desperately wanted to conquer. They attacked it head-on, they laid siege, they sent wave after wave of soldiers, and for 10 long years, Troy did not fall. The walls held, the city endured until the Greeks tried something different. One morning the Trojans woke up to find something strange outside their gates, a giant wooden horse. A gift, the Greeks claimed, an offering to the goddess Athena. A symbol of peace. Despite warnings, despite suspicion, the Trojans dragged the horse inside their city walls. That night, Greek soldiers crawled out from inside the horse, opened the gates, and Troy was burned to the ground. Not because it was weak, but because it trusted the wrong gift. Now fast forward to today, because that same story is playing out again, not on a battlefield, but inside the global economy. This time China is Troy. And the Trojan horse? When Donald Trump allowed advanced Nvidia H200 chips to be sold to Chinese companies, many people assumed it was a softening of policy, a business decision, a moment of pragmatism. It wasn't. This was never about goodwill, it was about survival. Because the truth is, American tech companies were being cut off from one of the largest markets on Earth. Nvidia went from dominating China to being completely locked out. Even Jensen Huang admitted it openly. At one point, Nvidia went from 95% market share to zero. And no serious policymaker could possibly believe that losing access to half the world's AI developers was a win. So yes, money mattered. Revenue mattered. Nvidia, Big Tech, Wall Street, they all needed the cash flow to keep the AI boom alive. But the real agenda went far deeper. The goal was dependency. The idea was simple: let China buy American chips again, just enough to lower its guard, get Chinese tech giants hooked on Nvidia's ecosystem, not just the hardware, but the entire software stack, CUDA, libraries, frameworks, AI tools, because once you build on Nvidia's architecture, leaving becomes almost impossible. It's like Hotel California, you can check in, but you can never leave. The H200 chip was perfect bait. Released last year, still powerful enough for frontier AI training, still relevant through at least 2026, a temporary bridge just long enough to lock developers into Nvidia's world before the next generation of chips takes over. Blackwell, Rubin, the future. And once China was fully dependent, all Washington would have to do is turn the tap off again. No invasion, no sanctions headline, just silence. And suddenly Chinese AI would stall, models would lag, innovation would slow. And here's the terrifying part for the United States. China saw it coming. Beijing understands the danger of relying on American chips better than anyone. They watched Huawei get kneecapped. They watched sanctions crush entire supply chains overnight. So instead of celebrating access to the H200, China quietly rejected the gift. And that's when alarm bells went off in Washington. David Sachs and other US AI strategists realized something crucial: the Trojan horse wasn't working. Because for Beijing, short-term acceleration isn't worth long-term submission. Semiconductor independence isn't optional, it's existential. And to achieve it, China is mobilizing its entire financial system. This isn't just subsidies, this is a full-scale industrial mobilization. Beijing is preparing massive incentives for domestic chip makers, not only funding companies, but potentially subsidizing buyers of Chinese chips to make them cheaper, faster, and more attractive than anything Nvidia can offer. And investors see it. Look at what happened with China's AI chip designers. One major IPO exploded over 400% in a single day. These companies aren't just copying Nvidia, they're building entirely new architectures designed to break Nvidia's grip. This is why money is flooding in. Because everyone knows the government is backing them fully. And here's the key difference between China and the United States right now. China can still stimulate, the US can't. China has almost no inflation. In fact, it's flirting with deflation. That gives Beijing enormous room to cut rates, flood markets with cheap capital, and supercharge investment without triggering a crisis. By 2026, China's 10-year bond yields could drop to 1.6%, even 1.5%. That's insanely cheap money. And cheap money means one thing: expansion. Alibaba has already issued billions in bonds, both domestic and offshore, specifically to fund AI infrastructure. Tencent followed. Baidu followed. Chinese tech giants are borrowing aggressively, building data centers and buying chips, but increasingly, Chinese chips. That is the endgame. And this strategy isn't new. It's the same playbook China used to dominate electric vehicles, starve real estate, redirect capital, and flood strategic sectors with funding until global competitors collapse. This time, the target is AI. China is preparing up to $70 billion in direct sector support. But here's the part most Americans underestimate. A dollar in China goes much further. Labor is cheaper, power costs are 30–50% lower, construction is faster, manufacturing is vertically integrated. That $70 billion could easily have the impact of $140 to $200 billion in the United States, and while China is ramping up, the US AI ecosystem is wobbling. American AI funding is a web of interdependence. Nvidia feeds data centers feed cloud providers feed startups feed hype feeds Wall Street. At the center of this web, if one major node shakes, especially Nvidia, funding across the entire system could dry up. And without China's revenue, that risk grows, because unlike China, the US is financially constrained, debt is expensive, rates are high, energy is scarce, and energy might be the biggest bottleneck of all. By 2033, the United States could face a 175 gigawatt power shortfall. That's not a small problem. That's a wall. Data centers, EVs, factories all competing for electricity that simply doesn't exist. China knows this. That's why you're hearing about data centers moving to the Middle East. That's why nuclear is suddenly back in the conversation. Even Jensen Huang admits it. Without massive energy expansion, the AI boom hits a ceiling. China, meanwhile, is building power plants at a scale the US hasn't seen in decades. Time favors Beijing. Now, there is one scenario where the US still wins decisively. If America achieves AGI, artificial general intelligence, first. If AI surpasses human intelligence and begins self-improvement, everything changes. At that point, cost, energy, and even geopolitics may no longer matter. It would be game over. But that's a massive gamble. And the longer the race drags on, the more China's advantages compound. That's why Beijing made its choice. No Trojan horse, no dependency, no shortcuts. China is betting on self-reliance, even if it takes longer, because once they succeed, they don't just sanction-proof their economy, they reshape global trade. Imagine a future where Chinese AI chips are 40% cheaper, competitive with Nvidia, and sold in yuan. That's not just a tech shift, that's a monetary shift, and that may be the real endgame. So now I want to ask you, will China successfully burn down the Trojan horse before it opens from the inside? Or will the temptation of Nvidia's power today prove too strong to resist? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you found this breakdown valuable, smash the like button, subscribe, and stay tuned, because this chip war is just getting started. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.